What's up, Wizards? It's Dev and Ziggy here from Mtg. We on that magic, and we're in kind of a lull period between Throne of Eldraine spoilers. They start back again Monday, gonna hit it hard. We're all gonna be hyped for that, but I figured I would take this time over the weekend to kind of, one last time cast our eyes back and our minds too on some of the stuff that's rotating, because if there's one thing I've learned over 25 years worth of standard rotations, it's that you're going to end up kicking yourself when a few of those cards just skyrocket in price after supplies start to run drier and drier, and those cards are important in other formats, and maybe you didn't know that, or you didn't know how important they were in other formats. So today, let's talk about 15 cards that stay important after rotation. And we're back. We got to go ahead and start the list because I got a lot to talk about today. I could have made this a top 30 or even top 50 list. I was actually mulling that over at one point. Probably a little bit of overkill, but in the end, I figured that we could just tie up a lot of loose ends here by making the honorable mentions just creature type stuff. Let's call it creature type stuff. Stuff like Unclaimed Territory to begin with. This card is already close to $2 right now, and that's mostly because it's a poor man's Cavern of Souls, and it's always going to be that, but that doesn't mean that you're always going to be able to afford it. A few years from now, this card could be, $6, $8 as opposed to the $1.75 or so you can get it for right now. And that's the case with a lot of Ixalan cards. You will see that trend, so let me go ahead and point that out. These sets just didn't get opened that much, and so the valuable cards from them are holding a lot of value, and that will prove even more true when supply is completely dry a few years from now. And the same thing is true of a lot of creature type stuff from the Ixalan block. Your two-mana lords, your anthem effects for Merfolk and Vampires, Legion Lieutenant, and Merfolk Mistbinder, those might not be super expensive right now, but 5-10 years from now, they're probably still going to be played in commander decks where people want to play Merfolk and Vampires. So I imagine these are going to end up going up in price. You could even make the same argument about the Forerunners, which are a steal to buy right now, but are going to pop up in creature type based commander decks from now to the end of eternity. But let's get into the actual list here. Start with number 15, Crucible of Worlds. Just want to go ahead and get this one out of the way. I mean, as far as like core set reprints that were important, there's a lot of these. There's Crucible, obviously, Omniscience, Scapeshift. All of these are important cards. You probably want to get your hands on them before they rotate, but I think that Crucible of Worlds is probably the one that I'd be looking out for the most at this point. This actually came out at around $15, so now hovering at around 20, represents a fairly high price hike. It still kind of says something that this card never really saw standard play, but still steadily rose in price while it was in standard. That means it will continue to do the same, especially once you can't buy core set 19 packs anymore. Now, number 14 is the first of a few commanders on the list. I just want to point out Jodah, but I want to do it relatively early on here. I think this is probably going to be a fun commander to play with, and again, until we're all done playing commander, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to spike in price. I will say, though, this is only like 45 cents to get your hands on a Jodah right now, and these 5-color commanders are a relative rarity. They're a lot of fun to play with, and yeah, commander identity, the color identity, is 5 colors, so you can play all your most powerful cards in your deck, and better than that even, this actually works from 2 angles. You can not only play all your powerful cards in each color in your commander deck if your commander is Jodah, but you can also play all your most powerful cards no matter how much they cost. We just talked about Omniscience. Imagine dropping Omniscience for only 5 mana instead of having to put that huge mana investment into it. And any card that costs, 7, 8, 9, 10 mana is going to be really good in your Jodah deck, so it just allows you to play the bombiest, splashiest stuff in your collection with no restriction on color. And I think that's the kind of thing commander players value very highly, so I wouldn't be surprised if Jodah was a popular commander a few years from now, and his price goes up at least a little bit. Number 13, another cool commander, but not like super powerful, so he's gonna appear relatively early on the list, and that's Arcades. I really love Arcades, and so do a lot of players, which is basically what's landing him a slot on the list. I've run into a few commander players already that play an Arcades deck, and I only imagine that number is going to go up as time goes on, but the supply is going to go down. Arcades is only like $350 already, and $350 is a lot and not a lot, right? Like $350 is affordable, but it's also kind of a lot for, even though it's Mythic, a Mythic that absolutely nobody plays. There are a bunch of 50 cents to $1 Mythics right now, you know, that no one plays whatsoever. Arcades is kind of one of them. When you think about it, this just hasn't really seen any mainstream standard play whatsoever. And I imagine a lot of the play that it is getting is in Commander. And it's going to continue to see play in that format if it is now. So with that in mind, I would say go ahead and get your hands on Arcades, because although this might take an initial price dip from people just experimenting with this in Standard, not being able to do that anymore, I imagine that again, over the next few years, this will stabilize and go well past 350. Now, number 12 is Arch of Araska. I was surprised at how few lands ended up on this list. It turns out that Arch is kind of the only one, but I think it's a really, really important land to have in most Commander decks, especially decks that are relatively few colors. You know, your 1-2 color Commander decks. Arch of Araska is going to go in most of the time if you've got extra slots in your mana base and nothing better to do with those slots. There are a litany of lands that you might rather play over this in your colorless lands slot, but if you just don't have all the most important lands in your collection, then Arch of Araska is a great workaround to kind of, again, fill in the slots for colorless lands that you're bound to have in your deck. Plus, in like all artifacts or mostly colorless decks, this is a shoe-in to get an inclusion. This just goes in so many Commander decks that I'm surprised it's sitting at $1 right now. Now, I've gone back and forth on what should be number 11 and what should be number 10. Like, what should start the top 10 and what should be sort of the honorable mentions of the top 10 list. I've switched these two creatures an awful lot, but I feel like this is the right way to go. But just so you know, I think they're kind of interchangeable. Number 11 is Wayward Sword. Now this thing, in case you didn't know, is already like approaching $8, and it just doesn't see play in Standard. It has seen play in fringe Standard decks from time to time, and it does see occasional play in Scapeshift decks, but in the more successful Scapeshift list, you never see this card. So it just, for all intents and purposes, is not a Standard played card, but it's still $8. It's not even Mythic, and it's like getting close to $8, which means, again, considering which set it comes from, one of these Ixalan sets, that means it's only going to go up and up and up once it rotates out of Standard, and supply is 100% dry. But let's get into the top 10 with the other creature that I kept switching back and forth with Wayward Swordtooth, and that's Tindershoot Dryad. This commands like half the price of Wayward Swordtooth, which is why I kept switching them back and forth. And I think Wayward Swordtooth has such a high price tag right now for no apparent reason that it's almost certainly being driven by Commander play. And that's why I kind of wanted it to be number 10. But Tindershoot Dryad, I think, has the higher ceiling, especially if you're looking to invest in these cards. Hashtag MTG Finance. I know it's a dirty word. We're not supposed to do it. But if you're looking for a card to sink some money into, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But I will say that this is one of those that in 5 years, it's almost guaranteed the card's going to be worth more than $3.50. And I think that the ceiling of growth on this is much higher than a card like Wayward Swordtooth, which is probably going to cap out at like $10 or something. But Tindershoot Dryad probably caps out around the same, I would imagine. Again, this is all speculation, all coming from just my mind. It's just my opinion, man. But I would imagine that this has around the same cap as a card like Swordtooth, but it's starting from a much lower point. So if you're looking to make that investment, I think this is the wiser investment. Because again, this is one of those where the entire reason it commands even the price tag that it does at $3.50 right now is Commander play. The card is very, very good in Commander. Again, that's sort of an unspoken thing. We all know how good Tindershoot Dryad is in multiplayer formats, and there are some people trying to make it work in Standard, but not enough to drive the price to the point that it is currently. And again, this is one of those cards where the ceiling can only go up, and I imagine the ceiling is relatively high. Well, let's look at number 9, a Commander that sort of follows all the same rules I've been jabbering on about. It's Olinda. This thing, too, is like $7.50 right now, and there's just no reason for it. If you're looking at Standard, Modern, Legacy, playability, the card just doesn't have any of that whatsoever. The entire reason this card is $7.50 is because it's not only Commander playable, but it's a pretty good Commander in and of itself. That's it. It doesn't have to be your Commander. This goes in Teysa Karlov decks and all kinds of other Dying Creatures Matter decks and Tokens decks. This just goes in so many things and slots into them so well that it's commanding a relatively high price tag, and I really don't see that changing. So whether you're playing Olinda as your Commander or just a synergistic piece in a deck with a different Commander, again, I don't see her going that far down anytime soon because she's not 750 because she sees play in standard vampires. She doesn't. Now, number 8 is another commander that I think is probably going to trend slightly upwards in price, but the reason it's number 8 over a card like Olinda is mostly a matter of personal preference. It's Moldratha. I just really like Moldratha. Turns out, though, so do a lot of commander players, and honestly, similar to Olinda. This is one of those where it's either your commander or it goes into your commander deck for synergy, but very often Moldratha is, the main attraction, the headliner, the one that's calling the shots. She's your commander, and she's such a popular commander even right now that she's, again, $6.50, $7 for a Moldratha, and again, it just doesn't see any play outside of the commander format, but it's such a good commander that it's relatively difficult already to get your hands on a Moldratha, and she costs a lot more than she has any business costing, and she's trended upwards dramatically. There was a point where you could get a Moldratha for like $1.50, and it wasn't actually that long ago, but as rotation approaches, her price tag is getting higher and higher, and there can only be one reason for that. It's people speculating that she'll be an important card once things rotate, and the only reason she can be important is because of commander. I just don't see people not playing Moldratha anymore because she's not a standard playable card. She's such a powerful and already in a way iconic commander that, again, sky's the limit for Moldratha, and this could easily be a $20 card 10 years from now. Now, number 7, I'm cheating a little bit with this one, and I'll be cheating with number 6 slightly too, but I'm going to say Growing Rites of Itlimoc. We're going to say that because I think that this is the best of this cycle, but I pretty much like this entire, enchantments that turn into lands cycle. I like pretty much all of these. I just think that Growing Rites is probably the best way to illustrate this cycle if we're talking about commander playability specifically. Again, this is one of those cards that's like $7.25 to buy right now, and it just shouldn't be. This has not really seen play in standard outside of a few times people tried to make it work when it was very new in the format, and it just hasn't worked. So the whole reason it's commanding this price is commander. That's a weird sentence, but anyway, the whole reason it's over $7 is because it's so playable in EDH. Now, again, all of these, Search for Iskanta, already pretty high price tag on that, and it's mostly because of its standard playability, but it is a very commander playable card, and even some modern decks play it. So, not a whole lot, but even some modern decks play it. So it's probably going to hold a price, a relatively decent price too, but it's been trending downwards drastically over the last few months as people prepare for rotation, whereas Growing Rites has been coming up. Same thing, though, with things like Journey to Eternity and Profane Procession and even Hadana's Climb. These cards have been trending slightly upwards as people prepare for rotation, and that means that they'll probably continue that trend after rotation. And obviously things like Journey and Profane Procession are obviously very powerful commander cards, but of this whole bunch, I think Growing Rites is probably the one that you want to buy the most. Now for number 6, we'll go from enchantments to artifacts, because there's a bunch of transformable artifacts that become lands that I also think are probably going to be important in Commander until the end of time, but I'll say Treasure Map. I'll say Treasure Map is number 6. I'm a little surprised this card is only like $1.25, $1.50, something like that right now. It was like $5 just a few months ago, but it's fallen, out of favor in Standard over the last month or two, ever since Core Set 20 came out. The card's been trending down and down and down, and this is one of those cards that's held a pretty good price the entire time it's been in Standard. And I attributed a lot of that to Commander play, and I still do. I think one of the only reasons the card is still even $1.50 is because of its Commander playability, because it really doesn't see much play in Standard at all anymore. I think it'll probably trend upward over the next few years. Again, most of these cards will take years to get to the level that I'm talking about in terms of like return on investment or, price spikes and stuff like that. I think that it'll take a minute for supply to run dry, especially with stuff like Treasure Map, where people bought a lot of this card, and if there was a reason that people opened this set, it was some of these transformable artifacts, and Treasure Map was a big one. But also cards like Thematic Compass and Primal Amulet, these are very important Commander cards that you probably want to get your hands on too before they go up, because they almost certainly will. But Treasure Map is probably it's just my favorite. That's probably the actual reason that I'm putting it up on the screen more so than the other cards. But Treasure Map is one of those that I expect to spike, and $1.25 is kind of a steal for this card that's probably going to slowly work its way back up after rotation. Now, number 5 has kind of worked its way down the list. At first, I put this way high up in my top 3. But as time has gone by, Joyra has worked her way down to number 5. This is only about $2 right now, and that was one of the reasons she was at number 3 to start this, is because I think that $2 is an absolute steal. That is the bargain of the century for a card that's going to be really important in Commander from now until we are all long forgotten. Joyra is just, again, this is an example of one of those commanders that not only makes a great general in your EDH deck, but is also just a great card to go in the other 99 in your deck, because you're going to be playing a ton of mana rocks at the very least, a bunch of ancillary artifacts in your commander deck, plus, maybe a saga here and there, a planeswalker here and there, a legend here or there. And so you can end up getting all the value in the world, off of Joyra just in kind of a passive way. But then there are decks that use her as their general that get tons of value, far past passive value. They draw 8 cards a turn off of Joyra, sometimes more. And some of the commander decks I've seen that are based around Joyra are some of the most powerful and unfair commander decks I've ever run across. So it would not surprise me if Joyra was way more than $2 a few years from this point in time. Now, number 4 is the Immortal Son. I almost thought at one point about putting this at number 1. Artifacts are just inherently more playable in EDH because any deck can play them. Any old commander deck, no matter who their general is, can play artifacts. So they have more inherent value in the commander format and in pretty much any format because any deck can fit them. And if more decks want them, that means they can command a higher price tag. And definitely, I feel that way about the Immortal Son, but I don't think that it's the most powerful card or even the most powerful artifact for the commander format that we currently have in Standard that's about to rotate. That said, I think it's one hell of a powerful artifact, and it's probably going to continue to be very important in EDH as time goes by. And this is another one of those where I just can't see a world where, yeah, it's like $12 right now, and it's trended downward from 20, just for your information. But I don't see a world where 5 or 6 years from now, it's still $12. I imagine this is probably going to fetch a fairly high price just because of all the advantage that it brings to you. But we're in the top 3 now, y'all. This is the business. And number 3 is a card that's worked its way up the list. It's the opposite of Joyra. She's worked her way down. This has worked its way up from like number 10 to number 3. Because every time I look at the price of Twilight Profit, I am amazed. This card is like $10.50 right now. And again, just doesn't really see much standard play. Yeah, a Black-White Vampires player here or there will slot it in, but there's really no standard demand for this card, or Modern, or any other format for that matter, aside from EDH, and the card is $10.50. It's also Mythic, so it's going to hold its value a lot better than rares from these sets. It's in an Ixalan block set, which again means that set just was not opened hardly at all, and none of the Mythics ever got released into the wild. So, I mean, some of them did, obviously, but the number of this card that's actually out unopened in the world right now is much less than just about any other card on this entire list, and that's one of the reasons its price tag is so high and will continue to trend higher as time goes on. Supply for this card is reasonably low compared to most of the other cards on this list, and it's just such a powerful commander card that has so much demand right now and again beyond in the EDH format. So I would recommend getting your hands on this right now because $10 seems like the ceiling, but it's not. If it's already $10 right now and it's still available, it's still in Standard no less, the card's just going to get way out of control a few years from now. Now, number 2 is the last commander on the list. What is the commander I recommend buying the most that's rotating right now? Can you guess? Let me know in the comments. Don't cheat. You unpaused? Number 2, Zakama. Now, Zakama is like $15 right now. And again, the only reason that she's $15 is Commander. That is it. That is it, Chip. That is the whole reason this thing is $15 right now. And it kind of faces the same issues I was talking about with Twilight Profit. It's Mythic, it's from a set that just did not get opened that much, and it's a ridiculously fun commander that not only, older, more established players really like. Everybody likes dinosaurs. Zakama's a really powerful commander. There's not only dinosaur stuff you can do with her, but there's also like unfair, combo-y, loopy stuff that you can do with Zakama as well. So she fits into that pocket of commander players. But new players love Zakama. New players love tribal stuff. New players love dinosaurs. Younger players love dinosaur tribal too. This just fits into so many little boxes for the commander format and different kinds of commander players that I just don't see this card going south anytime soon. $15 is a very, very high price tag, so you might wonder how much movement the card can actually make. I don't know, y'all. Zakama just strikes me as the kind of card, and the conditions are right for it too. That'll be $30 5, 6, 7 years from now, as opposed to the $15 she is right now, because she's always going to be an in-demand commander that can do unfair things or just like fair tribal stuff, and you get a kick out of casting it. Or you can just combo off and do crazy stuff. You can also do that. And it just, I don't know, y'all. It fits the bill and fits so many different kinds of commander players so well that I think this is going to be one of the most well-remembered cards from all of Ixalan block moving forward. But my number one card might actually surprise you. It goes against some of the rules that I've laid down so far. It's not from Ixalan block. It's not even from core set. Not at all. It's not a mythic. It was in a set that's been opened to hell and back. I mean, Dominaria was open like crazy, but I still think I'm going to make Helm of the Host number one. Now, this goes back to what I was saying about artifacts. Artifacts are just really, really important in Commander because any old deck can play them, and the convenient thing about Commander is that every single Commander deck has a card that you want to slap Helm of the Host on. There are just so many ways to abuse this card that I don't see it going, getting passé at any time in the next 70 years while we still have the Commander format or some approximation of it. This is going to be an important card. Again, not only because you're playing a Commander that you want to equip this with, or you want to equip this to, but you're playing a bunch of other creatures that you want to equip this to as well. And there's just so much combo potential, so much fun to be had with Helm of the Host that just about every Commander deck could play it. And you wouldn't fault the player for slotting this in to, again, just to literally any EDH deck just about. So I just don't see this card going anywhere. It's trended very highly up ever since it was first released. When it was first released, you get this card for about $1.50. Then it went up to $2.50. Now it's at about $3.50. And then now it's like $5.25 to buy this card. And again, it's just up and up and up and up without ever having seen any standard play whatsoever. And I just don't think that trend is going to break once the card leaves standard. If anything, the trend will accelerate. So I get your hands on it now because this is one that I can guarantee just about in 5 or 6 years is going to be more than it is now because it goes in. Again, it just goes in like every Commander deck. But that's my 15. Hope it was a crisp list for you. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit the thumbs up button. Subscribe if you haven't done it yet. Make sure you hit the bell for the notifications. Lots of Throne of Eldraine spoilers coming out. You want to be up to date on those, so do the YouTube stuff. And if I piqued your interest, made a good case for any of these cards, you're interested in buying them, just hit the first link in the description, go over to TCG Player, and I'll have every card in the list in a handy sort of deck format so you can buy whatever you need off the list just straight away. So yeah, try to make things as easy as possible for you. But in any case, I'm pretty sure I'm done with this one. If I missed anything, make sure you let me know down there in the comments section. Yeah, I know Admiral Beckett Brass probably going to be a popular commander from here until the end of time, but I'm not sure it's actually going to increase in price. Blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of cards that you could single out, so just let me know in the comments section what your sort of favorite rotating cards are that you think will hold their price and beyond past rotation. But aside from that, I guess I'm done. So I'm going to get out of here for now because I got to get ready. Got to get some sleep for these Throne of Eldraine spoilers that are happening like tomorrow as I record this. But anyway, let's focus on the future when the future happens. Let's focus on this now. Just let me know how you felt about it down there in the comments, and I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.